Richard Skipper celebrates. Every show is a celebration. Each show, Richard delivers the artists you love, showcasing what makes them unique. Never gossipy. The antidote to a sometimes hectic world. Now, here's your host, Richard Skipper.
Happy Friday, everyone, and welcome to the latest edition of Richard Skipper Celebrates. I hope that all of you who are seeing this have had a wonderful week and that you're going to be able to go out into the world tomorrow and in the following days, unmasked, distantly, of course. But I am so excited about tonight's guest. Richard Glazier happens to be one of my favorite people in this business, whether he knows it or not. He celebrates the Great American Songbook. And there are several of my worlds that are colliding tonight because I love Broadway musicals, I love Hollywood musicals, and I love Turner Classic Movies. And this weekend, the Turner Classic Movie Film Festival is happening virtually, of course. And Richard Glazier is part of that celebration. In a moment, you're going to meet Richard. But before I bring him on, I'd like to give you a little glimpse as to what you can look forward to this weekend on Turner Classic Movies.
In this program, you'll meet unforgettable personalities who are connected to the music I'm going to play, including Patricia Morrison, who originated the title role in Cole Porter's Broadway musical, Kiss Me, Kate. I sit down with composer Lalo Schifrin, who wrote iconic television theme songs and the scores of many successful movies. You will also see the very last interview ever done with Ephraim Zimbalist Jr., star of two of the longest-running series on television. These are just a sample of the creative artists you'll hear from as we celebrate great music from Broadway to Hollywood.
Richard Glazier, how are you? Welcome to the show, first of all. I can't hear you. You are muted. This is live.
It's always a pleasure to visit with you.
Now I can hear you. So I missed everything you said. So start again. Welcome to the show, first of all.
Thank you. It's wonderful to be with you, Richard. Thank you for that beautiful introduction. It's always wonderful to be with you.
Well, I really appreciate the fact that you're here. And both of us have such a love for these American standards that we've grown up with. I grew up in a small town in South Carolina. You grew up in Indianapolis. But you started taking piano lessons at the age of 6. Did you grow up in a household that had a lot of music around?
Well, my mother was an actress, and she adored the theater, and she was from Indianapolis as well as my father. And in the mid-1940s, after she graduated high school, she went to New York to pursue the dream of being an actress. She studied acting with Frances Robinson Duff. She ushered at the ballet. She ushered on Broadway. She eventually became a page at CBS during the golden age of radio. And she would tell me all these wonderful stories about like how she would escort Jeanette MacDonald into the studio and how Jeanette MacDonald was wearing pink shoes and she matched the color of her hair, but it had pink in it. Or the big scar that was on Frank Sinatra's neck that she saw when he came into the studio. And she just, show business was in her blood. And then when she came to Indianapolis to have a family in the 50s, when she kind of gave up on the dream, she became very active in community theater. And so I was with her, I cued her lines, I went with her to rehearsals, and was introduced to the world of the theater from the time I was, 8, 9 years old. And then there was an upright piano in our house, and I just started kind of playing it with one hand kind of thing. And she started giving me lessons with a lady in the neighborhood, and a talent started to rear its ugly head. No, just kidding. A talent started to show itself. And when I say the talent, it's just kind of a passion, if you will, for music. Of course, talent is very wild, and talent really doesn't mean anything unless it's developed or focused. And that's the hard part. Of course, talent, many people are talented. It's what you do with the talent, and that's what makes it so special. And it's been a lifetime developing that talent, and it's been a very, very difficult, emotional road full of hills, peaks and valleys, and but I wouldn't trade it in for the world, because it's all about passion and love and communicating what you feel so deeply on the inside of your soul to other people, to entertain them, to make them forget about their problems for just an hour or two, to create beauty and magic on the stage. There's nothing like it.
Now, when you started playing the piano, and I agree with you with everything you just said, but when you first started playing the piano, I'm assuming, and I could be wrong, that you probably started out like most children, once you start to learn to play the piano, with classical music.
Absolutely. And I'm a trained classical pianist. When I have a doctorate in piano performance from the Cleveland Institute of Music, where I'm grounded and trained in classics. I mean, I made a debut at the Carnegie Recital Hall in the 1990s, and I played Mozart and Schumann and Debussy. But as I was studying and playing all of that repertoire, I always adored this genre that we love so much. And I decided that when I was in my late 20s to early 30s, to dedicate my artistic life, or basically my life, to this genre exclusively, because I loved it so much. And so what I was able to do is, when I interpret this music, that I'm able to see it through the eyes of all of my classical training, so that each note that I play ideally has a conscious energy behind it, that I'm trying to sing the line as Judy Garland or Ella Fitzgerald or Fred Astaire would sing the line. I imagine how they would sing it, and I try to translate that into my fingers. As my dear friend Hugh Martin told me, he said, Richard, you sing through your fingers. And that was such a wonderful compliment. And that's really what I try to do.
Well, let me ask you a question about that for a moment from your perspective. When we hear a great classical song, let Over the Rainbow, Judy Garland, obviously Over the Rainbow has been covered by many people, and we want them obviously to bring as much of their personality to a song as they possibly can. But every once in a while, they feel that they can improve upon what the composers created, and they put their own style to it. I have a very definite knee-jerk reaction when that happens. What are your thoughts about that?
Well, I create custom arrangements that are made just for me, kind of tailored to my style, if you will, in kind of this romantic piano tradition. And it's kind of this fusion of the romantic piano and these gorgeous romantic songs, while always trying to stay faithful to the melodic line and the basic harmonies of the songs. And that's how I interpret it. I'll play Over the Rainbow with the same respect and love that I would interpret a Chopin nocturne. So, as yes, people have their own styles. That's very true. But in my style, I try to emulate the human voice and how they would sing it, and having spent a lifetime watching these musicals, going to the theater, listening to these performances on record and live, I have developed my own taste and my own style that I interject into these songs, while always honoring and respecting the composers and their intentions.
Mm-hmm. Now, the other night I was watching Turner Classic Movies, and there was a wonderful interview where Alec Baldwin was interviewing Robert Osborne. And Robert Osborne, did you see the interview, by the way?
I've seen it before. I didn't see it the other day, but is it when they sit down with him and interview? Yeah, I've seen it.
Yes. But one of the wonderful things that I really loved in this interview, and Alec did such an incredible job, was these stepping stones throughout Robert Osborne's life that led him to being at the right place at the right time all along the way. And I want to talk about some of the stepping stones in your life. And the first one was when you were 9 years old, and you were watching Girl Crazy, the film.
That's right.
And how that moment changed your life. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Right. As I said in my show, not this show, but another show, that I was in my parents' bedroom, and there was a black and white television set. It had rabbit ears, and you had to move and jiggle the rabbit ears in just the right way to clear the snow from the picture.
And God forbid that the wind changed.
Oh, God forbid. And what came into focus was this lovely, lovely Judy Garland singing "Embraceable You, But Not For Me, I Got Rhythm," and that energy that she had with Mickey Rooney. It's the first time I had seen her, and I fell in love right then and there with those songs. And luckily I had an aunt in my life who was my grandmother figure. And I told her about this experience of seeing that movie. And bless her heart, she took me to the public library, and we went into the stacks in those days and carried out just all kinds of old sheet music. And we went into a carol, and we went through the sheet music, and she introduced me to Fanny Brice and Eddie Cantor and Al Jolson and Sophie Tucker and all of those greats she had seen come to Indianapolis to entertain in the 1920s. After all, my aunt was the Charleston champion of Indianapolis in the 1920s, and one of her favorite things to do in the 70s was Charleston for me in her living room to the soundtrack of Thoroughly Modern Millie, and how I loved rummaging through her old 78 records, where I discovered Oscar Levant playing the Rhapsody in Blue for the first time from a recording that she had bought in 1945. That was another defining moment for me. And it all started there, and we spent every Saturday afternoon together, and we would maybe go to the Goodwill, we'd go to the Salvation Army, we'd go to garage sales looking for memorabilia, looking for wonderful things to buy that I still have in my home today that bring back many wonderful, warm memories of those beloved, innocent days.
When I was 13, That's Entertainment came out. And
1974.
That's right. Well, now you know my age. But when that film came out, there was such a nostalgia craze.
Me too. It defined. Yes. I think I saw it 4 or 5 times. I was so mesmerized by it. I loved it so much, and how Jack Haley Jr. did such. When looking back on it, did such a masterful job. He did a phenomenal job on that. In my hometown theater, and I was the only person sitting in the theater at some of the showings, and I did see it several times as well. But I bring this up because most boys and girls who have that introduction to those films at that time would sit down and think, I'm going to write a letter to Mickey Rooney. I'm going to see if I can reach out to Judy Garland, whatever. You wrote to Ira Gershwin. I did. I certainly did. And that was before That's Entertainment. I was 9 when I wrote to Ira at the suggestion of my aunt, because my obsession with the Gershwins became so great that my aunt, on a Saturday afternoon when we were spending together, said, let's sit down at the typewriter and write Ira Gershwin a letter. I mean, George, of course, passed away on July 11th, 1937 at the age of 38 from a malignant brain tumor, but Ira lived until 1983. And so we sat down at the typewriter, and what am I going to say? Well, she started dictating to me, and, Dear Mr. Gershwin, may I please have a picture of George to hang in my room? and that's where it all started, because he answered. We corresponded. My letters are now in the Gershwin archive at the Library of Congress because he saved them. And we corresponded, and it culminated 3 years later when he invited this kid from Indianapolis, Indiana, this 12-year-old kid, to come visit him in Beverly Hills. Ira was very reclusive for many, many years, very rarely leaving his house. He never fully recovered from the death of his brother. They were two halves of a whole. They adored one another. George was gregarious. Ira was introverted. Ira was really one of the first people to recognize the genius of his brother. And when George was playing at parties in the 1920s, and you'd have to literally pull him off the piano bench at 4 a.m, because he'd play all night long in his happy place when everybody was gathered around the piano singing his songs and celebrating his music, it would be Ira just sitting in the corner admiring the genius of his brother. But I always say at this moment, that we must never forget the genius of Ira Gershwin for one moment, who was a master of rhyme, alliteration, of metaphor, of simile. I always go back to how long has this been going on, when he rhymed salmon with backgammon.
Unbelievable.
or my nights were sour, spent with Schopenhauer. or give me the free and easy waltz that is Viennese. And although Ira was very, very up and down emotionally the rest of his life, he did work again after George's death, but not that much. He worked with Jerome Kern in 1944 when he wrote Cover Girl for Rita Hayworth and Gene Kelly. When they wrote with Kern, he wrote with Kern that gorgeous, gorgeous song, Long Ago and Far Away. He worked again with Kurt Weill in the 40s when he did Lady in the Dark for Gertrude Lawrence. He wrote My Ship and the Saga of Jenny. And then the last thing he really ever did was in 1954 for Judy Garland, when he wrote with Harold Arlen, of course, A Star is Born.
And you are going to play a song from that for us a little later in the program. But when you wrote that first letter, how long, and folks, those of you who are too young to remember, you had to wait for the mail to get that letter to you. How long did you wait before you got a response?
2 weeks, a week, not long. And he answered my letters. He answered my letters within days of each one that I wrote. And see, we corresponded so much that he invited me to come to Beverly Hills. My parents and I got on the airplane, got on TWA from Indianapolis, and we flew to Los Angeles. We stayed at the Beverly Hilton Hotel. That was Merv Griffin's hotel. And
were you, excuse me, but were you flying out specifically for this?
Yes, yes. And Ira told me to call him at 2:30, and we called him. He told me to come over. He lived at 1021 North Roxbury Drive, which is right across from Sunset Boulevard, maybe a 5-minute drive from the Beverly Hilton Hotel. Ira lived at 1021, and Rosemary Clooney lived at 1019, and Polly Bergen lived at 1025, and Agnes Moorehead lived at 1023, and Lucille Ball lived at 1000, and Oscar Levant lived at 905. Wow. And I always say, but I'm not name dropping.
Name dropping is okay when you're dropping those names.
And I'm always thinking, and I just thought about this recently. I haven't talked about this much, but it hit me, and I've started talking about it more since my father and mother are both deceased, and my father passed away. I was thinking about this more. My father was kind of a big man, and he was a veteran of World War II with 3 Purple Hearts, having fought in northern Italy from 1943 to 1945 in the Fifth Army. And he was, a little rough around the edges, if you will. He was a hard-working man. We knew that Ira was a bit fragile. He was a bit not in good health. And don't you know, he didn't want to go in with us because he didn't want to overwhelm Ira. And he didn't go in with us. I went in with my mother. And he waited in the car on Roxbury Drive for 4 hours while we visited Ira. And that's something that touches my heart very deeply.
And how old were you at this point?
I was 12 years old. And you see, the other thing that was so wonderful, the wonderful memories leading up to that meeting, and even after that meeting, is that my parents bought me a 16 millimeter Bell & Howell sound projector from the 1950s, one of those metal things that you manually loaded that was built like a tank, those things. And in those days, you could go to the public library and check out 16 millimeter Technicolor prints and black and white pristine prints of all the classic films for free for 48 hours. And so I would go with my mom, we would get a movie, And this is where I was introduced to all this stuff, in my basement. And she would sit in a rocking chair, and I had my chair, and we'd thread up the projector, and she would tell me about all of the characters that were in the movies, the character actors like Cuddles, S.K. Sakel, or Don DeFore and Doris Day and Hugh Herbert, and all of these character actors that would pop up in these films, Eric Blore, all these people. And this is how I was introduced to them. And honest to goodness, those memories are probably the fondest memories I have in my entire life, is sitting in that basement with my mom, being introduced to that world of the golden age of Hollywood on the 16 millimeter projector in our basement.
Now, what were the choices that you were making for the life path that you were going to go on?
Right.
Even at this early age, did you feel, I want to play professionally? I want to play classical piano. I want to play standards. You want to do it all?
Both. That's right, both. And see, I was lucky that I had parents that encouraged me and believed in me, but they really didn't know what to do with me, because they weren't musicians. My mom was an actress. She wasn't a musician. And so she saw the raw talent, but she didn't know what to do with it. And that was a real struggle. And that was hard to find my voice. And it took time. It took tears. It took frustration. It took several times of wanting to give up. It took the time to find the right teacher with the chemistry, to develop my piano technique, to develop my style, to develop how I approached the keyboard. All of these basic fundamental things, the foundation of being a musician, so that you can take that foundation and soar as an artist. But if you don't have that foundation, you cannot soar as an artist.
And what were the steps that you took towards your dream? I mean,
studying like a slave driver, not patience, discipline, repetition, listening, striving but never achieving perfection, good training, disappointment, triumph, love. That's number one.
Well, there comes
Passion.
a fork in the road. The fork is New York, Hollywood.
Well, I went to college. To study classical piano. So I went in, I got an undergraduate degree from Indiana University, a master's degree from Indiana University, and a doctorate of piano performance from the Cleveland Institute of Music, because the original thought was that I would, love this music and play the piano, but I would be a classical pianist. I would play the staples of the repertoire: Beethoven, Brahms, Schubert, Liszt, Chopin. And then I would eventually get a job being a piano professor at a university. But as I said, I won a couple of international piano competitions when I was in my 20s. And I made a decision then that I would not play classical piano anymore, and I would devote all my energies to this art form of the golden age of popular song that we love so much, and to studying it, to researching it, to interpreting it, to performing it. And that's what I have done. And it's just evolved. Things, as you know, things just evolve in life. They don't, how many things in life turn out the exact way that you envision them?
Envisioned it.
They really don't. That's not reality. But you evolve and strive for that, that you can, and learn, and constantly learn from your mistakes so that you don't make them again. And that's what I did to get me to the point of making this television show From Broadway to Hollywood, which is my third TV show. My wife and I shot all the interviews. We did it all ourselves. We set up the lights. We brought in the cameras, the mic, and I edited the entire show myself. It's edited entirely on my own, and was only finished by the studio when I took it back to get color balanced and sound balanced, et cetera, et cetera. But the grunt work was done by me because I have a passion for
that. Passion is definitely there.
Yes, I mean,
Amen.
I remember when Kenner Toys I made a little 8mm little silent projector for children. I used to go in my closet and project like Popeye cartoons in black and white on the little plastic 8mm projector made by Kenner Toys when I was like 7 and 8 years old. So I mean, it's interesting, but you know, it seems like if you're going to really excel at any type of passion in your life and try to be really good at it, it almost, I'm pretty sure, I mean, it almost has to be born in your childhood.
Mm-hmm.
Would you agree with that? Would you agree with that?
Absolutely, I agree with that. But there are also two moments that happens in every entertainer's life. There's that moment, and I want you to talk about both. There's that moment where you get paid for the first time for the work.
Absolutely.
And then that other moment is that
Absolutely.
big break. And a lot of times, what is the big break for you is something that's internal. It's not necessarily what the rest of the world envisions that is your break. So what was that first moment when you were paid? And I want to talk specifically about American songbook standards, that you were paid to play that music, and what you consider to be your first big break.
Well, okay, so in 1990, I won something called the National Federation of Music Clubs Young Artists Prize in Philadelphia. And that's kind of a major prize. And it presented me to music teachers conventions all over the country. And this is kind of where I got my chops. And I got paid for going out and playing these conventions. And I was playing the classical repertoire.
Okay.
But something very interesting happened. In Little Rock, Arkansas, of all places, just thinking of Jane Russell and Marilyn Monroe and Gentlemen Prefer Blondes. But anyway, two little girls from Little Rock. Anyway, so there was a very wonderful lady that I was spending time, I was her house guest while I was in Little Rock. And we were talking about this very thing about Gershwin and how I met Ira and how much I love this music. And she said, I want you to come back here next year and I want you to give a narration and performance about the music of the Gershwins.
Wow.
It never occurred to me. And I did that, and thus my trajectory of how my life would go was born.
That one moment changed your life. Well,
Yes.
let me ask you this. Where do you fit on the spectrum of ambition and really being driven with, obviously the talent is there, or finding that throughout your life being at the right place at the right time?
It's more, for me, it's been ambition or if you will, determination, not giving up. Mm-hmm. As we all know in show business, 99 no's and one yes most of the time, and that one yes makes it all worth it. But you indeed, in the journey to performance and doing these things, absolutely have to have triumphs as well as failures. You can't have failure. There's got to be triumphs in there, because that's what builds your self-esteem and your confidence, because you cannot go out on the stage and give of yourself unless you believe in yourself and you believe in your message and have the confidence to deliver that message in a focused, wonderful way. That's ego, if you will, and that's not necessarily about, you know, I'm so great kind of thing. It's about believing in yourself and love, and that marriage of those two things to create the most wonderful experience that you can for your listener. Because as a performer, we have tremendous responsibilities to entertain. That's a tremendous responsibility, because the person that's come to hear you has, number one, paid money to hear you. Mm-hmm. You know, you talk about getting paid. Well, the other end is the spectator, the audience has paid money to hear you.
Exactly.
And they have said, okay, we've paid money. We're giving you 2 hours of our life, taking out 2 hours of our life to sit here and listen to what you have to give, to be transported and to be entertained by you. That is a tremendous responsibility, and I know you've been there, and you feel the. I know that you feel the same way, Richard.
I feel that right now. I feel that every person who is choosing to spend a Friday night with you and myself, and then moving a step further, when the show that we're going to talk about in a moment will be shown on Turner Classic Movies, that people will invest their time. They may not be putting money out to see us right now, but their time is just as valuable.
Time is very precious, and we all need, even as performers, and any human being in life, no matter what they do, and not necessarily even in the arts, but we all need validation of some sort. We need validation. It's very important when a person does a good job to be validated, no matter what it is. And as artists, we even need that even a little bit more sometimes, because we're talent. One pays a price for talent. It doesn't come free, and one pays a very deep price emotionally for talent, and that's just the way it is.
Well, you talk about validation. One of the things that I admire about you, that you and I both have done, is we've made a point to preserve these stories. And you've had the good fortune of meeting many of the movers and shakers in this business. And that pretty much is what From Broadway to Hollywood is all about.
Right.
You're telling their stories. I'm going to pull up, just give me a second here. I'm going to find this. I have a wonderful clip that I want to show, and then you and I will talk on the other side of this.
Okay.
You made me love you. I didn't want to do it. You made me love you. And all the time you knew I had to do it. You made me happy. Sometimes you made me mad. And there were times, dear, you made me feel so glad. You made me love you. Didn't want to do it.
That's true, yes I do. You know I do.
Give me what I cry for.
You know the
Kind of kisses that I cry for. You know you made me love you. Oh, God.
That is so incredible. And tell us the circumstances about that. That is not in
Yes.
the presentation.
No, that was in my second TV show for PBS called From Ragtime to Real Time, and we did that interview. Actually, that was done during the very first TCM Film Festival, the very first one they had in Hollywood. That's when that was done, and I went to the powers that be at Sony Pictures and got the Barbra Streisand pre-recording stage, which of course is the old MGM recording stage, where all that greatness took place, where Mickey recorded with Judy, How About You, Our Love Affair, Embraceable You. I mean, all of those greats, it was done in that space. I mean, you think about Mickey Rooney, the man had 9 decades in show business. From silent, he was Mickey McGuire, all the way up to Night at the Museum in the 2000s. And so anyway, I wanted to interview him, and he agreed, and I wanted to do it somewhere special. So I hired a limousine. They picked him up at his home in Westlake Village, and they brought him to the studio, and they brought him right to the door of the soundstage, and I was outside to greet him, and he took my arm, and he wasn't walking very well, and I brought him to the piano. That piano that you just heard was Arthur Rubinstein's West Coast touring piano in the late 1940s, and it's been on that stage since 1950. And we put Mickey beside it, and that magical moment happened where you could see he was kind of transported, singing You Made Me Love You, which of course launched Judy Garland into stardom. Absolutely. When she sang Dear Mr. Gable into You Made Me Love You. And you can see that, I'm not a singer, I sing through my fingers, but what I was doing in that clip was prompting him for the lyric, because Lord knows how many decades it had been since he had sung that or heard that. So I was just prompting him, and then when he got the lyric, I would drop back out, singing wise, and that's what I did. And he was so delighted that afternoon, because Mickey, it's sad in a way, and I don't want to get deeply into this, but he didn't take pleasure at the end of for most of his life, in the wonderful, wonderful gifts that he gave our culture, arguably being one of the most talented men in show business. There's nothing that man could not do in show business.
Absolutely. And
was singing, dancing.
Do you feel that he is not revered the way that he should be at this point?
Well, in some ways, yes, because his personality got in the way, if you will. He was not a happy man. He was a troubled man. He had psychological issues. You know, all of these kids they never had a childhood.
No.
They had to support their families from the time they were little children. They never got to play. You know, baby Peggy, Diana Sarah Carey, she passed away last year, a couple of years ago. She was the silent movie star. She was a silent movie star. Baby Peggy, I mean, she was top grossing box office as a 6-year-old in 1922 for silent films. And she knew Mickey and she knew Judy very, very well. And she said in the 30s, late 30s, early 40s, we had a party. All of us had a party. But we didn't know what to do. We didn't know how to, we didn't know what to do. The kids' party, so what did they do? What did they do at the party? What did they do? You're not going to believe this, but it's absolute truth. They put on a show. That's what they did.
Wow.
That's what they did, because that's what they knew how to do.
You know, it reminds me of that line from A Star is Born, and I'm talking about the Judy Garland Star is Born with James Mason. It was on the other night, and I watched it yet again. I never get tired of this film. And when James Mason, Norman Maine, is looking for Judy late in the evening, he goes to the Coconut Grove to find her. And the maitre d' at the Coconut Grove said that they go to these little clubs after they've been performing all night at some benefit or whatever.
You got it.
And they go in and they are there performing for themselves. Judy Garland,
exactly right.
They used to go to parties and get up and perform for each other.
That's what they did.
Have been fortunate enough to be at some of those parties, not with Judy Garland, but with other stars. Arlene Dahl,
oh my,
to drop a name, is a neighbor of ours. And her parties were like going onto the set of MGM. You'd see Ann Miller and Jane Powell and all of these other MGM stars just hanging out and getting up and singing for each other. It was just the most incredible thing. And you've been fortunate enough to be a part of all that.
Yeah, there's something, isn't there? There's something very magical about witnessing that too. Seeing the creators of great things live in person. It's I've had the honor of sitting in a room watching Charles Strauss singing "The Sun Will Come Out Tomorrow," "Once Upon a Time." I've heard Jimmy Webb sing "By the Time I Get to Phoenix" live. Hugh Martin singing the Trolley Song at his home. Johnny Green playing Body and Soul. Ira Gershwin sang "Embraceable You" as I played for him on George's piano when I was 12 years old. I live for those moments. I live for them.
And who was the first? I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, I'm just saying that this is my fuel. This is what really gives me the fuel to keep going. Is those experiences, those memories, those wonderful times of hearing these things that you love so much come from the mouth of the creators. Is just cherished memories.
I had a great mentor when I was a kid, Florence Epps, and she said to me that when we would have these lessons, she had a little playhouse in her backyard, and we would go, and if we were reading and she would ask me, for example, who is Baby Peggy? Or who is Richard Glazier? Who is Mickey Rooney? And if I didn't know, she would close the book and she would say, "I will see you next Wednesday. Know who these people are."
Oh, great. Love it.
She instilled in me. She said that every time I stepped on stage, and now I feel the same way when I am in front of a camera, that that I am carrying the mantle of all of these people that have gone before me.
Amen. That is
And
exactly
I
right.
feel that this is what you do.
It's exactly right.
And it's being forgotten. I mean, thank God for YouTube. And if I go on YouTube, and I mean, I watched a lot of your interviews in preparation, and it's like going down a rabbit hole. I never want them to end. And I mean, the work that you did, with the music of A Star Is Born, for example, and and everything, just letting them tell their stories.
Talking about Gene Allen, the legend of Gene Allen, who was right there with Cukor during that whole filming of A Star Is Born. He was setting the camera marks, he was setting the lighting, he was picking the furniture. They were a team, Cukor and Gene Allen. They worked together, and to hear him talk about that, and that is in From Broadway to Hollywood, part of the interview I did with Mr. Allen, who is deceased now. So fortunate to get him interviewed before he passed away. These people who made movies, they don't know how to make, the young people don't know how to make movies like that anymore. They don't know how to do it. It was an art in itself to make those kinds of movies. I mean, it took days and weeks of planning, of perfection. It's
Well,
just,
talk a little bit about that
something.
for those who don't know. That like the Freed unit and the Pasternak unit, and
Yes.
these groups of people that would come together to create this iconic film classics that we now know. It wasn't just throwing something up on screen.
Oh God, no. Arthur Freed, of course, the producer of the greatest musicals that have ever been produced, knew talent. He smelled talent. And he recruited the best talent that the world had to offer at Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer in costuming, in lighting, in camera, in sound. Fred Astaire, Gene Kelly, Judy Garland, all part of the Arthur Freed unit. And what Arthur Freed understood, Arthur Freed was not the most refined man in the world. He wasn't a highly educated man. He wasn't
From my home state of South Carolina.
That's right. That's right. And he was again very rough around the edges. But boy, did that man know talent. He knew talent, and he understood. He understood that when Mr. Astaire said, "Arthur, I need 3 weeks to rehearse this," he gave it to him because he understood that.
But they also knew how to delegate. They knew how to get the right people for those jobs.
That's right. That's exactly right. It was a unit that performed together to create this single brilliant work of art. I mean, I just watched the other night the restoration of Showboat that just came out on Blu-ray, and oh my God, that masterpiece of a movie. When Annette Warren sings for Ava Gardner, she sings Bill and Can't Help Loving That Man. And the way that Ava Gardner acts, and the way that George Sidney directs, and the way that Arthur Freed produces. I mean, they built a Showboat, for goodness sakes, on a lot at Culver City.
That's right.
They spent $100,000 building a Showboat in the late 1940s.
Well, Olivia de Havilland told a story that when she was working on Gone with the Wind, Walter Plunkett, who did the costumes,
Right.
She had these very elaborate pantaloons that were underneath, and she went to Victor Fleming, George Cukor at the beginning, and said to George Cukor, "All this money is being wasted on costume pieces that the audience will never see. Why is the money being spent there?" And Walter Plunkett said, "You will know what it is to wear these costume pieces.
Oh,
And it will
so
add
true.
to the character." And it's so true.
No, so true.
And
And it's very much like Vincent Minnelli. He was known for including all of these extras, the Minnelli extras. That was his trademark, seeing all these extras. And don't you know, he directed each one of those extras. He told them what to do. He directed them. They all had a purpose in the scene. They weren't just like sitting at a table just conversing. He would tell them how to act, what emotion. I mean, this is the attention to detail that these people paid attention to. This is why these movies live. You know, they fell out of fashion, and then we came back in 1974. Remember the slogan of That's Entertainment? And they said, "Boy, do we need it now!"
Need it now.
And they restored it. And they showed it in 70 millimeter stereo, so it was beautiful. But these movies really are not meant really to be seen on TV. They should be seen on the big screen. And now, thank goodness that we have this equipment. We can see they were restoring, and we see that gorgeous black and white or that gorgeous 3-strip Technicolor. This is the way it brings a whole new life to the movies. And we're so lucky that we live in this age that we can experience them. Actually, probably they look better than the way they looked when they were shown originally at the Lowe's Theater or the Fox Theater, or wherever or the Warner Theater.
Well,
before
it's
the
very
Supreme Court broke
interesting.
up.
I was reading not too long ago, That's Entertainment. And I remember vividly when it opened and all of the television specials and all of these great MGM stars being on all the talk shows talking about that era. And think about this for just a moment. When That's Entertainment came out, the last film that is really highlighted in the film is Gigi. That was only 20 years prior to this.
No, that's right. That's right. That was, and actually, to take that a step further, really the real goodbye to the Arthur Freed unit, the Minnelli unit, the real goodbye was Bells, but certainly Gigi, yes, I agree. But then there was one more movie they made, and that's Bells Are Ringing with Judy Holliday and Dean Martin, which is not a great film, but
it's fun.
It was directed,
I love it.
It was directed by, I love it too, and I love the Julie Stein score, of course. But that was produced by Arthur Freed and directed by Vincent Minnelli. But Gigi certainly is. I mean, it's just the most luscious, eye-popping thing that you'll ever want to see. And the attention that Minnelli paid to in detail.
And I don't think it's considered a great masterpiece, but On a Clear Day, visually is just one of the most beautiful movies ever filmed.
Beautiful. And of course,
the score is phenomenal.
Burton Lane, Alan J. Lerner. You can't go wrong with Burton Lane and Alan J. Lerner. So.
Well, I want to talk a little bit about your road to Turner Classic Movies.
Yes.
Let's go back to the genesis of this project and how it got to Turner Classic Movies.
Okay, so I've had a relationship with the powers that be at TCM for about 10 years now, and they invited me actually to do their very first to do my show on their very first TCM cruise as well. And this show that they're exhibiting on the channel was produced in 2014 and originally aired on the public broadcasting. It was bought by PBS, and it's out of contract now, just laying around. And I submitted this idea. I'm always submitting ideas to TCM, and I submitted this show, and they watched it, and they took it, and I am just absolutely tickled and delighted and happy, and it's such an accomplishment to get this program on TCM. I'm so honored to be a part of that.
Do you think the timing of the pandemic has anything to do with it?
I think it certainly does, because there would be no film festival virtually if there wasn't a pandemic. It would be in Hollywood right now. And so they picked up the show for the virtual film festival. They found a place for it. They found a fit for it, if you will, which they might not have found if there wasn't the pandemic.
Now, when everything shut down last year, what did your calendar look like leading in?
Well, I lost. I was just getting ready to be guest soloist with the San Antonio Symphony when it shut down, and it was I have not played on a stage since a year ago February, and you know this is our life, and we suffer for it.
Are you disciplined in terms of sitting down at the piano every day and playing?
It goes and comes. It waxes and wanes. And I find people, I do better when I have a deadline. You know, I'm getting ready for something, and then I really crack down and go into the salt mines.
Now, to talk about you for a moment, you live in California.
Right.
And I know that everything is opening up in the next few weeks. Have you been out publicly? Have you gone to restaurants? Have you seen any live?
I have not. I've been pretty much sequestered all year. I'm very lucky. I have the most wonderful wife, and we we just spend our time together watching movies in our movie theater, and we have an extensive collection of memorabilia that we go through and catalog and find places in our home, and do a lot of internet stuff. And I set up this internet kind of virtual studio with the piano here, and so that's what I've been doing. But I think now we'll start maybe going out a little bit more. That it's and see, I'm going to get my toe wet, if you will. I'm a little bit of a nervous Nelly anyway, so.
Now I'm going to ask you a question. I hope I'm not putting you on the spot, but we've just come through award season, and the Oscars were on a few weeks ago. Did you watch the Oscars? Did you get a? I mean,
only a little bit. It was tough. I mean, I didn't know the movies. I hadn't seen many of them. I don't know. I miss not having an orchestra there. That's hard. You think about the old Andre Previn conducting the Academy Award Orchestra, Johnny Green, or in the 70s it was Bill Conti. You miss that. I miss that.
Well, I have a theory that I'll share with you. I think, number one, that those of us, watching the Oscars was something that I look forward to every year. I look forward to it like Christmas and Easter and Halloween and everything else. And it wasn't about what people were wearing on the red carpet, but a love of film. And I feel that the powers that be, if any of them happen to be watching this, and I hope they are, rather than trying to get that younger crowd to come in and see it, that's not the audience. That's not the audience who's watching this. Celebrate the audience that you have. Celebrate the people that are watching, and give that audience the show that they want. I heard someone say recently, it was almost as if the producers this year said, "We dare you to be entertained." They didn't have film clips. They didn't have music. They didn't have all the things.
It did. The magic was gone.
Right.
We live and are inspired by that magic that emanates from celluloid or from the stage. It's magic. It's wizardry, and it was kind of lost, I felt.
Well, I can't believe this. We're almost at the end of our show. I'm going to say a few words, and then I am going to turn everything over to you. I'm actually going to leave the camera, and it's all yours. And if there's anything after I speak that you want to expound upon that we talked about tonight, by all means, do so. Anything that we didn't talk about that you wish we had, now's your chance to do that as well.
I just want to say real fast, the reason I look a little washed out right now is the sun is beaming right at the camera. So that'll go away in a couple of minutes, and I apologize for that.
No, you look great. You absolutely look great. So, anyway, I want to thank everybody for being here tonight. As I said earlier in the show, you could be anywhere right now. And the fact that you chose to spend an evening with Richard and Richard means a lot to me. And I'm sure I can speak for Richard when I say this as well. If you do enjoy this show, please subscribe to Richard Skipper Celebrates on YouTube. If you haven't done so already, hit the like button and leave a comment. Let us know what your thoughts are on anything that we talked about tonight. Hopefully Richard will come back at another time, and we'll do more of these because it's always a pleasure to sit down and talk with him. I always end every show by telling everyone to go out and do something nice for somebody else without expecting anything in return. Go to your Facebook friends list and go to the 7th name that pops up and reach out with a phone call. Not an email message, not a text message, not a private message.
Beautiful.
Actual phone call. Let that person know what they mean to you. We're all in this together, but we're not in the same boat. But if you're going to be in that boat, make sure that you have a skipper join you. Richard, I really enjoyed this tonight.
Thank you. Thank you.
I want to thank you for the gifts that you've given to the world and that you will continue to give. And
too, Richard.
I cannot wait to see the entire show on Turner Classic
great.
Movies. I'm going to leave the camera. Say whatever you want to say and leave us with a song that I requested for tonight.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Well, as part of the special, I played It's a New World from A Star is Born, which originally was conceived by Harold Arlen and Ira Gershwin to be the hit of the movie, not The Man That Got Away. And it's in the show, it's introduced by Gene Allen, who of course was production designer we talked about. And I recorded it on the Warner Brothers soundstage where Judy actually sang it. And so you will see that in From Broadway to Hollywood. So to sign off, Richard asked me to play It's a New World from my living room, and that's what I'm going to do. And I want you to know it's just been a great pleasure spending time with Richard and doing this show. And thank you so much for watching, and thank you for inviting me, Richard.